I was live streaming a fortune-telling session when I got matched with a top lawyer streamer. He asked me to predict if he'd win his next case. I looked at what was behind him and stayed silent. When those who uphold justice become criminals, who will bring back the truth? I was already braced for a dismal turnout, but to my surprise, as soon as I started the live stream, a flood of fans poured in. Host hasn't streamed in ages, made enough money, huh? Finally waited for you, bedtime stories again, yay. Person above, how do you even sleep watching this kind of stream? I just get more awake and more scared the more I watch. I have to turn on all the lights at night before I dare close my eyes. I just smiled without saying anything. No need to scare yourselves, ghosts aren't that bored. Just 3 minutes into the stream, I received a connection request. The caller was a currently popular lawyer streamer, Jimmy, who gained attention by sharing cases he handled. He had just won a highly publicized divorce case. The wife, originally the plaintiff, was left with nothing and had to repay a huge loan, naturally losing custody of her child. Unable to cope, she jumped off a building. Master, I hear you're very accurate. Could you please see if I'll win my next case? Jimmy smiled at me, gentle and refined. Jimmy was already over 50, but time had been exceptionally kind to him. His jet black hair was impeccably groomed, giving him a charm that young heartthrobs lacked. I looked at the girl in red behind him and remained silent for a long time. Runes swirled in my left eye, revealing his life story. I never miss any of the host's streams. Usually, when the host makes that face, it definitely means they've seen something. I heard he represented that guy last time and drove his wife to her death. Do you think it could be? A beast in human clothing, he doesn't deserve to be a lawyer. Jimmy glanced down at the bullet comments, a flicker of malice crossing his brow. He stared fixedly at the comments, probably memorizing the IDs. They were just some outspoken individuals who liked to fight for justice, not worth being retaliated against by Jimmy for such a trivial matter. I quickly spoke up to draw his attention. Did you start feeling dizzy, with sore shoulders, and things just not going smoothly after that last case? Jimmy looked up, a flash of shock and fear in his eyes. He spoke to me with a newfound respect. Master, I always act according to the law, I haven't done anything bad. I stared at Jimmy's expression, but unfortunately, I couldn't detect any guilt. People like him were strong-willed, cautious, and extremely difficult to deal with. How about this, send me your address via private message later. I'll come down the mountain when I have time, I said faintly. After a few more calls about finding lost dogs and items, I ended the stream. Right after ending the stream, I received a private message from Jimmy with his address and phone number. It was a very famous villa area in the city. I heard that houses there were already going for $200,000 per square foot, yet they were still hard to come by. Some valued the location, others the facilities, and the area was home to a city's prominent figures, a network of connections money couldn't buy. For Jimmy to reach this position, it could be said that he already held considerable power and prestige in the legal world. I packed the talismans and magical artifacts I had prepared long ago. Although I might not need them, it was better to have them, otherwise, my credibility would be greatly diminished. Exiting the Taoist temple, among a row of cars, I got into a taxi parked by the roadside. The car radio was broadcasting an interview with Jimmy. He was explaining legal concepts to netizens in a witty and humorous style on the program. Driver, to City Central Villas, I said, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. Master, are you going to see that lawyer, Jimmy? The driver was a middle-aged man around 50, but his hair was already completely gray. However, his eyes were unusually sharp. Seeing I didn't speak, the driver smiled. I saw it on the live stream. I've watched a few of the master's streams, I guess you could say I'm a fan. Yes. Could it be that there really are ghosts in this world? The driver asked in a very natural tone, like casual chit-chat. I shook my head. There are no ghosts in the world, only the tricks of the human heart. That's true too. If you haven't done anything wrong, you're not afraid of ghosts knocking on your door. I drive at night every day and haven't encountered anything spooky, the driver chuckled. Of course, you're full of righteous energy and haven't done anything wrong. No ghost would bother you for no reason. Even if there were, they'd be here to repay a kindness. So, you still have to believe in science, I chuckled. As the car got closer to the destination, I suddenly broke into a smile. Sir, since you're a fan, I'll give you a free fortune telling. Please tell me your date of birth. As a string of numbers was recited, I pinched my fingers, a glint of gold flashing in my eyes, then disappearing in an instant. So fast he didn't even notice. Sir, your fortune is good. My fortune is good? The driver gave a dry laugh and shook his head. His smile was full of bitterness. The first half of your life has been a bit rough, but starting this month, your luck is about to change. Luck changing? The driver laughed loudly twice. I hope so. The knot in your heart will be untied, and the truth will come to light. The taxi suddenly stopped. The driver turned to look at me, his eyes filled with an unshakable shock. I've arrived. The money has been transferred to you, I said as I opened the car door and dragged out my bags. Because we had communicated beforehand, Jimmy was already waiting at the gate. Seeing me arrive, he quickly took the things from my hands. I instantly felt much lighter. This way, master. Jimmy opened the main gate, and suddenly 2 large dogs rushed out from the courtyard, knocking me to the ground. Upon seeing what was behind me, they quickly retracted their bared teeth and walked away with their tails between their legs. I looked up at the 2 fierce ghosts, one on my left and one on my right. Good thing I brought my tools today. Master, I'm so sorry, these 2 mutts scared you. Jimmy apologized insincerely. Knowing guests were coming, yet he didn't leash his 2 large guard dogs. Why did it feel a bit like he was trying to intimidate me? It's nothing. It's fine, I'll get my revenge. The room was plastered with many yellow talismans. It looked like the person who drew them had some skill. You've already invited someone else, so there's no point in me being here, I said, my fingertips brushing across the table, feeling the incense ash floating on it. Hey, master, please help me check if there are any oversights. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease, Jimmy said with a laugh, but his eyes were frivolous. Actually, when I entered the house, I noticed a phone propped up in the corner, probably live streaming the whole thing. He wanted to use me as a stepping stone. I slowly swept 2 fingers across the tabletop, my gaze pausing on the lucky bamboo plant on the windowsill. All the resentment in the room was seeping out from there. Didn't the report say she was in her 20s? Why does she look like a little kid in her teens? I rubbed the ash from my fingertips and lightly patted Jimmy's collar twice, presumably wiping it clean. Watching Jimmy's face instantly turn pale, fine beads of sweat gathering on his forehead. I chuckled lightly. I've taken a look, there's nothing wrong with these talismans. The person he hired was clever. Not wanting to get involved in his karma, they took his money and plastered his room with sleep-inducing talismans. If he slept soundly, no matter how much the ghost wailed, he wouldn't know. How could that not be considered helping him solve the problem? I left with my things, leaving my 2 tools behind. After all, they were much scarier than the little ghost in the house. The next day, I received a call from Jimmy. His tone was much more sincere, giving me the feeling he was pouring his heart out. He said his 2 dogs had been howling all night. When he went out to check, they were cowering in a corner, trembling, their expressions utterly terrified, as if they had seen something invisible to humans. They scared me, so I scared them back. That's called karma. I gave a light hum and hung up the phone. About 10 minutes later, Jimmy called again. This time, even the ringtone sounded much more reverent. Hello, master, am I disturbing you? Jimmy hesitated for a long time before saying, I wanted to ask if you have time to come to my house and perform a ritual for me? Didn't I just come yesterday? I checked, those talismans are mostly fine. As I was about to hang up, he quickly stopped me. 3 million, I'll pay 3 million. Please, master, help me. Living on the mountain is really inconvenient. You should ask the person you hired before to help you, I said, about to hang up. 5 million, I'll give 5 million, as long as the master can help me get rid of that ghost, Jimmy said hurriedly. I'll arrange a car to pick you up later. The car Jimmy arranged arrived, and the driver was actually the same taxi driver from before. Before I even got in the car, the taxi driver proactively explained, the boss chartered the car, it pays more than a whole day of driving a taxi. Understood, I chuckled. Sir, you really don't need to explain so much to me. This driver really talked a lot, from geography to weather, and then from weather to yesterday when Jimmy asked me to catch a ghost. Hey, master, what does that ghost actually look like? The old driver asked, feigning curiosity. She looks about 12 or 13, with pigtails, wearing a red dress, a round face, and a small mole under her eye. I watched the driver's expression, seeing his eyes instantly redden. Michael, born in 1970, a city's top scholar, attended Capital University, and served as the captain of a city's criminal investigation team after graduation. Medically retired in 2004, I stated. That little ghost is Sarah, murdered in 1997. In 1997, a city experienced a notorious rape and murder case. The victim was Sarah, a freshman at City No. 1 high school. A heavy rainstorm after the crime washed away most traces, turning it into a cold case. What was heartbreaking was that when Sarah was 2, her parents died one after another due to accidents and illness. She had always lived with her elderly grandmother. Sarah was not only an excellent student but also very sensible. According to eyewitness descriptions, a preliminary reconstruction suggested the suspect lured Sarah to a remote area by claiming to have a large amount of scrap to sell. A month after Sarah's death, her grandmother died of a sudden heart attack due to excessive grief. The driver slammed on the brakes, his eyes sharp and full of aggression as he looked at me. You guessed right, Jimmy is the murderer. It had to be said, Jimmy was very smart. He studied law and understood it. He had planned his crime meticulously, choosing the parentless Sarah as his victim, calculating the weather for that night, and having his tools perfectly prepared, leaving almost no trace of evidence. In the end, he even became a lawyer. How ridiculous, the one upholding justice was actually the criminal. Wait for me at the door later, I'll bring out the evidence, I said. Why are you helping me? Michael pursed his lips. His journey had been too arduous, too painful, too lonely. He didn't believe anyone would walk with him. When I left, I asked the founding master. The founding master said to help, so I have to help, I shrugged. Michael said nothing, just bowed to me as he got out of the car. His bowing posture was all wrong, and he still called himself my fan. Upon entering the villa gate, I saw Jimmy. His attitude was much better this time. He greeted me repeatedly as master and then took me to see his 2 dogs. The 2 dogs were cowering in the corner, trembling. I looked at Little Red, who had detached her own head, and Little White, who had removed her own leg, by the wall. I theatrically set up the altar, went through a flurry of motions, a fierce wind arose, and I suddenly thrust out the peachwood sword. I coughed lightly twice, signaling them it was okay. Little White and Little Red slowly floated away, and the wind stopped. The 2 dogs looked up, then quickly scurried back into their kennel with their tails between their legs. The ghosts outside this house have no karmic connection with you. I've dealt with them, so that's settled, I said with feigned hesitation. But the one inside this house, you know our line of work fears karma the most. If you don't explain the whole story clearly, I daren't help you. Jimmy took a deep breath, licked his lips, and hesitated several times before speaking. Since you don't want to talk, I can't help you either. With that, I started packing my things to leave, putting pressure on him. Master, Please help me." Jimmy quickly blocked my way, but it was clear he still wasn't planning to talk. I could only feign retreat. "How about this, you transfer me a portion of the deposit first. That way, we're in the same boat, and you won't have to worry about me spilling the beans." Jimmy made a few operations, and I received a notification that the payment had arrived. "I need you to swear in the name of your founding master." All right, I swear in the name of my founding master, I will never tell anyone," I said, raising my fingers. "Can you talk now?" I smoothed my clothes and prepared to listen intently. "Master, please come with me." Jimmy led me to his study. Behind him was the money plant, emanating black energy. He handed me a cup of tea. I took a small sip, not missing the suppressed excitement in his eyes. "I witnessed a murder," Jimmy said slowly. Clearly, he still didn't trust me. "On September 24, 27 years ago. In the cemetery behind village, that day, I originally intended to pay respects to my father, but I heard a sound in the bushes behind me. I was too scared at the time, so I ran away. Later, I heard a murder case happened there. A teenage girl died. The police came to investigate, but I was afraid the murderer would come to retaliate against me, so I didn't dare say anything." As Jimmy spoke of the emotional part, he even choked up a bit. "She must blame me too, right? Blame me for not standing up for her. Letting the killer still be at large." Those words, "at large," I don't know what kind of mentality he said them with. But it definitely wasn't sadness or regret. Even his expression showed no flaws. If only I couldn't see. The little ghost behind him, her features already burned beyond recognition and whitened by rainwater. Her limbs were twisted at grotesque angles. Jimmy was born into a family that favored sons over daughters. His father was a drunkard and gambler, but he only vented his anger on his wife and sister. Jimmy usually played the role of a cold bystander. When Jimmy was 11, his mother hanged herself after a domestic violence incident. After his mother left, his sister was forced to take on all the household chores and farm work. When Jimmy was 15, his sister was sold to an old man in his 60s from the same village. He was the one who found the buyer. Because the buyer's family also had an unmarried son, they could get more money. And with two men watching, his sister definitely couldn't run away. When Jimmy was 17, his father gambled away all the family's money and even pawned his son's organs. But before the debt collectors arrived, he died after falling into a ditch head first while drunk. Fell? It was a planned murder. Jimmy was cold and selfish. When his mother and sister were harmed, he stood by coldly, even joining in. When his interests were touched, he would retaliate frantically. After his father's death, Jimmy became an orphan. The school, seeing his good grades, waived his tuition and accommodation fees. But daily meal expenses became a problem. The money from selling his sister had long been gambled away by his father. So Jimmy could only work part-time washing dishes at a restaurant next to the school during his free time. The owner was very sympathetic to his plight and was even willing to give him credit, allowing him to continue working at the restaurant to pay off his debt after his college entrance exams. And so, the days passed one by one. But the thrill of killing his father lingered in his mind, itching at him. He dared not expose it in public. In private, he started by dismembering insects, then slowly began dissecting birds and beasts, and finally, he set his sights on Sarah from the same school. His first encounter with Sarah was at the scholarship award ceremony for underprivileged students. After the school introduced Sarah's background, those present were either heartbroken or sympathetic. Only Jimmy was excited, the excitement of discovering prey. She had no parents, only a grandmother in her 70s with a heart condition. This meant that within 24 hours of her disappearance, her family might not even have the ability to report it to the police. And after the crime, with a little provocation, he could send her grandmother away too. Who would seek the truth then? Poverty in the family gave him excellent bait. And she was smart, outstanding, and well liked by everyone. Killing someone like that should be much more interesting than killing the fierce dog belonging to Billy at the east end of the village. He set the time of the crime for the day before the college entrance exam to increase the credibility of his alibi, and he had already calculated that it would rain that night. That village was an urban village in a city. Under the pretext of having scrap metal in the village, he lured Sarah down a small path to the cemetery behind village and committed the crime. He wore gloves throughout the process and used a red-hot wooden stick to destroy Sarah's face and fingerprints. Originally, he intended to bury Sarah in the grave mound, but unfortunately, someone came. Hearing the commotion, he hurriedly fled. After a night of rain, there was little evidence left the next day. At that time, technical means were not advanced enough, and so he remained at large for 27 years. Since you're not telling the truth, I can't help you. I sternly packed my things, but I couldn't turn the doorknob. At the same time, an indescribable excitement and pleasure spread through my nerves. He had put drugs in the tea earlier. What truth? Jimmy suddenly curled his lip, approaching me slowly with a bizarre expression. Jimmy's eyes were bloodshot and red with the excitement of bloodlust. That driver's name is Michael, right? Jimmy's voice exploded in my ear. How could an escaped criminal forget the police officer in charge of the case at the time? In the past, he had long investigated the police officers responsible for the case back then. Some died of old age or illness, others were promoted and got rich. He held leverage over those in power. Even if things came to light one day, they would protect him. Only Michael was an exception. A top scholar from the 90s, his value was no joke. It was almost predictable that he would be promoted to a high position. But in 2004, Michael, who was only 34, chose to retire due to illness. He had been a driver, worked on construction sites, collected garbage, delivered takeout. He was like a fly that couldn't be swatted away, buzzing around him. So, he had to get rid of him. Master, aren't you a fortune teller? Why didn't you foresee your own calamity today? Jimmy sneered as he pulled out the wooden hairpin that held up my hair. The listening device hidden in my hair fell to the ground. Jimmy's hand lightly tapped the computer screen beside him, which strikingly displayed the surveillance footage of the entire house. The situation was exposed. Michael would definitely come to save me. Unlike last time, I didn't see any butlers or servants when I entered the door this time. He even left the door ajar, as if welcoming Michael in. From the initial live stream connection to the current interlocking events, it was all his plan. He wasn't afraid at all. He had even buried a lock of Sarah's hair in the potted plant behind him as his trophy. A knock on the door sounded. Michael had arrived. In this situation, how could he not know he had fallen into the criminal's trap? Jimmy opened the door wide, showing him his masterpiece. I was contorted on the floor, a look of pleasure on my face, my mind frenzied. It was clearly the state of someone high on drugs. How could Michael, a former police officer, not recognize it? You beast! Michael grabbed Jimmy's collar, pinning him against the wall. His entire skin turned red from restraint. He was a police officer, so he couldn't knowingly break the law. Michael, this counts as trespassing, right? I have the right to call the police, Jimmy said with a provocative smile. Her family is really poor. When I broke her hand bones, I barely used any force. The entire house, only the study specifically had no surveillance, so he could be unscrupulous. Michael's grip tightened, even though Jimmy's face was already turning red from lack of oxygen. He was forcing Michael to commit a crime. The female ghost's eyes were growing redder and redder, a sign of impending loss of control. There were no windows in the room, yet a wind began to blow. Jimmy and Michael both froze. I slowly climbed up from the floor, my scattered hair lifted by the wind, my pupils reflecting a golden light. Do you really think there's no retribution in this world? Before the words were out, a fierce wind suddenly arose, sweeping up the white paper on the table. How are you okay?" Jimmy stammered. Seeing I was fine, Michael's anger subsided by half. He loosened his grip and dropped Jimmy to the floor. "Of course, I'm fine." I patted the dust off my clothes and smoothed out the wrinkles. "Don't you believe in karma and retribution? Then open your eyes wide and take a good look." I lightly brushed my hand past Jimmy's eyes. He screamed and frantically looked for a place to hide. The moment his third eye opened, Sarah, with a ferocious expression, was right in front of his face. "Get lost. Get lost." Jimmy waved his hands as if shooing something away. As the only person in the room who couldn't see, Michael looked confused. What's wrong with him? Maybe he's done something wrong and feels guilty and scared. I calmly took out my phone and started recording Jimmy. Watching Jimmy go from threats at the beginning to begging for mercy later. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have killed you. Please let me go," Jimmy kept kowtowing to the empty air. Michael pursed his lips, tentatively opening his mouth several times before finally asking, "Master, are there really ghosts in this world?" Michael's master this time felt more devout than ever before. "You're the city's top scholar and a former police officer, yet you still believe in this stuff? Haven't you studied materialism?" I frowned. Michael fell silent once more. The door was violently slammed open, someone breaking the deadlock. It was an acquaintance, Ryan, the one who made me work overtime before. He was clearly stunned when he saw me. The scene was quickly brought under control. The three of us were taken to the police station and interrogated separately. Jimmy accused Michael of breaking in and assault, and accused me of trying to sell him drugs by demonstrating them in front of him. I have a pair of magical eyes that can see ghosts, the past, and the future. Although I had already foreseen today's situation, I still couldn't help but laugh out loud when I actually experienced it. He really had the nerve to say that. "Captain, I want to report something. Jimmy committed murder." Following my identification, the police found a strand of chemically treated hair in a potted plant at Jimmy's house. DNA testing confirmed that the hair belonged to the victim, Sarah. Faced with material evidence, Jimmy remained calm, clearly having made arrangements long ago. He pushed all the blame onto his butler, completely absolving himself. He stated that he had no idea there was anything hidden in the potted plant. The butler also confessed and detailed the crime, with all details matching. At the same time, perhaps due to some leverage Jimmy held, the higher-ups at the police station kept pressuring Ryan to close the case quickly. After the questioning, when I saw Jimmy again outside, a lawyer was standing beside him. He shrugged at me provocatively. He had already been successfully bailed out and was preparing to go home. The moment I brushed past Jimmy, I shouted, "Captain, I want to report bribery and corruption." I originally wanted to report it anonymously, but now the person was provoking me to my face. How could I tolerate this? Under my guidance, the police found a list of bribes and corrupt dealings in Jimmy's basement, detailing specific dates, times, and locations, as well as evidence of many people breaking the law while enforcing it. "Did Jimmy tell you this too?" Looking at Ryan's distrustful gaze, I said firmly, "Of course, otherwise, who could find his basement?" Jimmy had dug a basement under his villa. The key to the basement was very cleverly hidden. It was the USB charger slot behind his bed. Only when the charging cable was inserted and turned exactly 7 times could the basement door be opened. The basement housed many animal specimens he had personally dissected, like a large museum of death. And in a safe in the corner of the basement, lay that piece of evidence. When I saw Jimmy again, he was a completely different person from before, appearing very tense. He truly was a very meticulous person. The evidence he had was enough for a conviction. He was still dressed in a suit and tie, his face slightly haggard. I looked at his black hair, lost in thought. Why should his crime plague Michael for a lifetime? I knew his calculations. As long as he didn't admit to killing Sarah, his crime was only bribery and corruption. He'd be out after a few years in prison. During this time, with some money spent on connections, life wouldn't be too bad. It doesn't matter, I will tear apart his last lifeline. Captain, I have more to report. During the simple identification process, I slowly raised my hand. Watching Jimmy visibly flinch, I shrugged at him. Consider it a provocation returned. Captain, I want to report that Simon is not the real murderer of Sarah, because he's impotent. Simon was Jimmy's butler. After Jimmy killed Sarah, he had been grooming a perfect scapegoat. The orphan Simon from the same village was a good choice. He had no parents, was blind in one eye, and had no money. Under Jimmy's sincere persuasion, he wholeheartedly did things for Jimmy. He helped Jimmy manage the villa and even successfully married a wife with the money Jimmy gave him. Before the incident, Simon's wife and son were sent abroad by Jimmy, essentially as hostages, to prevent Simon from turning against him under pressure. But Jimmy, in all his calculations, never anticipated that Simon had problems in that department. Even his son was a result of him cuckolding himself to hide his impotence, letting his wife have a child with someone else. Everyone has their own calculations. Jimmy would never have thought that, for fear of losing his own privileges, Simon would conceal the most crucial information. Watching the expression on Jimmy's face crumble, I smirked triumphantly. Under Jimmy's dazed gaze, I once again called out to Ryan. Captain, I have more to report. I know there was another witness to the Sarah case back then. The person who scared Jimmy away that year was none other than Jimmy's own sister. Unlike what he thought, the person didn't arrive after he committed the crime, but witnessed the entire process. I've reported everything I should. Ryan arranged for someone to send me back to the Taoist temple. After staying at the station for so long, everything in the temple was covered in dust. I picked up a black button that had rolled onto the floor and stuffed it into my Taoist robe. I took out the backpack stuffed full of children's photos that Ryan had given me. On the back of each photo, he had thoughtfully noted their birth dates and times. I opened the template form Ryan had sent me and started working overtime. I had only finished a third of the work when Ryan came to fetch me. Jimmy's sister said she didn't know anything and was unwilling to testify against Jimmy in court. Wearing my newly prescribed glasses, I craned my neck to look at the computer screen, typing one key at a time with my index finger. Just tell her that when she was sold back then, Jimmy was the one who found the buyer. That should do it. Can't you even stir up trouble? I rolled my eyes at Ryan speechlessly and started typing again. I've lived for hundreds of years, I never thought I'd actually become nearsighted. This period of time has made me rediscover the feeling of going to work. I feel like actually, being dead would be pretty good too. I want to stir up trouble too, but I don't know how to do a reading either. Our captain asked me to ask if you're interested in working at the police station? We'll pay you a monthly salary of $15,000. No thanks, I don't want to work. I looked at Ryan resentfully. Before I met him, I was just a carefree little Taoist priest. After meeting him, I have endless work. How about you reconsider? It's not a contract job, we'll give you a permanent position, Ryan said enticingly. It was the first time I saw both righteous indignation and fawning on a person's face at the same time. I have to admit, the conditions he offered were indeed very tempting. But to hide my identity well, I generally choose not to work, and even if I do, it's for a maximum of 5 years. Otherwise, with this face of mine that never ages, I'd be captured for research in a few years. And I can't enjoy the good welfare benefits of a permanent position either. If I get sick, I don't need to see a doctor. Just stay sick, I won't die anyway. Ryan tried his best to persuade me, even drinking 2 pots of water. But my reluctance to work was exceptionally firm. Who wants to work 9 to 5 when you can sleep until 11 or 12? So Ryan chose to take a step back. He hoped that if there were any cases in the future that the police station couldn't solve, I could use my knowledge to help them. They would pay me accordingly, based on the number of cases. Seeing Ryan's "I'm not leaving until you agree" stance, I had no choice but to nod. Seeing me agree, Ryan grinned widely and left. Before leaving, he didn't forget to ask me to send him a copy of the compiled spreadsheet, which would greatly save rescue time. Great, every day feels both idle and tiring. With the help of Jimmy's sister, Jimmy's crimes were now supported by both human testimony and material evidence. When Jimmy was arrested, I stood in the distance, watching Ryan hand the handcuffs to Michael. Michael had carried these handcuffs for half his life, and finally, he fastened them onto the criminal's hands. I chuckled softly and turned to leave. But unexpectedly, Michael caught up to me. With his worries lifted, he looked much more relaxed. "Master, I apologize for deceiving you. Actually, Ryan is my apprentice." Michael bowed his head and apologized to me. My face didn't show the surprise he expected. After thinking about it carefully, he understood and bowed to me formally. "Actually, when I came down the mountain that time, I wasn't planning on taking a taxi. Someone found me and begged me to get in your car." I took out the black button from my pocket and handed it to Michael. The button was from the 90s and had been worn down to a matte finish. The button lay quietly in Michael's palm. He seemed to recognize it. Then, the button trembled with his fluctuating emotions. "Is this from Sarah's grandmother's clothes?" Michael seemed to be asking, but his tone was affirmative. He could remember all the details. After Sarah died, her grandmother always wore black clothes. Right up until she passed away from a heart attack, she was still wearing that same black dress. Of course, her death was no accident. It was the result of Jimmy's deliberate provocation. Knowing the truth before dying, the immense resentment allowed the old woman to linger in the human world. "Is she okay now?" "She's holding her granddaughter's hand." They left together. I stopped, looked up at Michael, and said, "The fortune I told you back then wasn't nonsense. You will live to be 93, and from today onwards, your luck will change for the better." Seeing Michael still looking unconvinced, I said, "Sarah and her grandmother died accidentally. They've given all there and used good luck to you." Michael looked at me, blinked twice, pursed his lips, wanting to speak, but found he couldn't make any sound. Master." He wanted to smile and talk to me, but the words that came out were tinged with tears. Finally, he couldn't hold it in anymore and broke down crying. Too many things had happened over the years: forced medical retirement, leaving his beloved job prematurely. His parents passed away, and his relatives and colleagues didn't understand. Sarah was an orphan. Who cared about seeking the so-called truth? He started out walking with others, then slowly drifted apart from them, until finally, he was alone on this path. He had worked many jobs and endured much hardship. He never married and had no children. His life had been too bitter. He didn't want anyone to share his suffering. Now that the truth was out, it proved that everything he had done was worthwhile. They cared, and they reciprocated. It is precisely because of people like Michael that countless unjustly killed souls can find peace. When Ryan arrived, Michael was still crying loudly. A crowd of onlookers had already gathered. He was sobbing so hard he was about to pass out. I raised my hand, pretending not to know him, and covered half my face. "So embarrassing, he's been crying for half an hour." As the culprit who made him cry so miserably, I didn't dare to leave, so I had to call his apprentice. "All right, master, we caught the bad guy." "This is a good thing, you should be happy," Ryan said, pulling Michael into his arms and patiently comforting him. Finally, Michael stopped crying in his embrace. It was too intimate. I didn't dare to look. I saw someone in the crowd already taking out their phone, preparing to record a video. I silently took out the mask I had prepared earlier and put it on. This matter had nothing to do with me. I was just a passerby watching the excitement. That day, Michael cried until he was out of breath and was driven home by Ryan. The next time I contacted Michael, he sent me a message telling me Jimmy was sentenced, death penalty, immediate execution. He got what he deserved. And don't think he got off too easy by dying. Although Sarah and her grandmother have reincarnated, Jimmy's father is still waiting for him down below. I clicked on Michael's profile picture and scrolled through his social media feed. These past few days were full of photos of him eating and drinking out. He hadn't been around for a while, and his face had clearly gotten rounder, with a healthy glow. Looks like he's having some luck in love. My glasses prescription went up by 2.00 diopters just to finish the stuff Ryan gave me. With the subsidy he helped me apply for, I decided to go on a trip to Sea City to rest for a bit. I saw online that due to a variety show filming a few years ago, West Fort Village attracted a large number of tourists. The government invested heavily, turning West Fort Village into a tourist attraction to develop the economy. From the pictures, the changes looked quite significant. I was also missing the food from West Fort, but I never imagined that on a trip out, I would be abducted. In a remote mountain village, I was offered as a sacrifice to an angry mountain god.